Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, July 16. I'm Herman Green with your midday news. A special welcome if you're watching online at onespotmedia.com. Yet another accused in the Uchence gang trial has been released. This is the sixth person that has had charges dropped against them since the court started hearing no-case submissions. This morning, Chief Justice Brian Sykes upheld a no-case submission brought against Tashina Baker, dropping all related charges against her. The alleged gang members are on trial for breaches of the anti-gang law for crimes allegedly committed between 2015 and 2017. Ms. Baker joins 5 others, Tevin Kani, Cornell White, Shade Beckford, Junior Rose, and Judith Johnson, who were recently freed after the prosecution dropped its case against them due to insufficient evidence. A woman from Arnett Gardens in St. Andrews says she has been hiding and living in fear from her husband. 28-year-old Danisha Howell says she is a victim of domestic violence as her estranged husband has threatened and physically injured her and her children repeatedly. She says she has reported the incidents to several police stations, but says enough is not being done.
Whenever these cases reported to the police station, it's like most of the police them not say them incompetent, but them not take it serious. Somebody have to directly dead. You understand?
She says she has also reported the matter to social intervention groups, including Women's Inc., but their assistance is insufficient. For now, she has to stay with friends and relatives, hiding from her husband.
No fear. The community I'm born and grown, I fear thing for leave. Me and my kids them, I fear thing for leave from the community through this man, one man.
She is begging for help before things get deadly. Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson said he wants rank-and-file members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF, to be promoted quicker. He was speaking to police officers in Montego Bay, St. James recently. We have more in this report from TVJ's Dashan Hendricks.
We have to continue to have a process of transparent promotion.
Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson bemoaning the slow pace of promotion in the Jamaica Constabulary Force. He was addressing members of the officer ranks in Montego Bay, St. James recently, telling them that a fair process will be developed to push rank-and-file members up the ladder much quicker than they are now being moved.
Over the next couple of years, we need to get a lot of new officers. A lot of new positions for officers. That means you guys have to be spotting youngsters who are showing extraordinary leadership capacity.
The latest Economic and Social Survey of Jamaica, ESSJ, shows that at the end of last year, the JCF had 11,790 policemen and women. Only 344, or less than 3% of the total, were of the officer ranks. That is, assistant superintendents, deputy superintendents, superintendents, senior superintendents, assistant commissioners, deputy commissioners, and the commissioner himself. The establishment calls for 482 officers, leaving a gap of 138 for the commissioner. This gap must be filled. He admits the process to do so won't be perfected overnight, but he says identifying and pushing youngsters in the JCF will be the only way the force will get renewal.
Let's find a way of preparing them and moving them fast. That's how you get renewal. The people with the right attitude. People who really want to do something, who like to lead, who are interested in the people who are led. And let's put them on a track and move them so that we don't have a big gap in terms of age and experience in the organization between those leading and those led.
Dashan Hendricks, TVJ News.
In the meantime, General Anderson is calling on those who are now in the officers' rank to show more respect to the men and women they lead. He also calls on them to build a trust among the rank-and-file members of the JCF.
We must build the trust for our rank-and-file members in the officer corps. That has to go from strength to strength to strength. It cannot be that they trust particular officers. They need to trust any officer because you're an officer. Which means if they have a concern, if they have a problem, and they go to any officer, they know it will be treated in a proper way.
The People's National Party, PNP, is piling pressure on the Holness administration to come clean about issues affecting the Education Ministry. The party had a press briefing this morning saying they are not satisfied with explanations that an investigation is ongoing.
PNP General Secretary Julian Robinson is calling on the Prime Minister to say something to assure the nation that he's not being silent about the corruption now engulfing the Education Ministry.
We believe that the Prime Minister has a responsibility to first tell the country the information that was available to him prior to the firing of Ruel Reid and what he did when that information became available to him.
Mr. Robinson also calls on the Prime Minister to relinquish his office's hold on the Education Ministry and appoint someone with full authority to oversee its day-to-day functioning. His colleague Ronald Thwaites, who is the PNP's spokesman on education, says he hates to be reverting to the same issues over and over again, but said it's necessary if the truth is to be uncovered. Among them, how did the Education Ministry get entangled in a web of corruption?
Who did authorize the wild expenditure that has obviously taken place in the Ministry of Education since 2016? My knowledge of the system is that it is very, very involuted and difficult to secure payments and disbursements. Who authorized them? Who knew what? What is the code of silence within the ministry that seems to be affecting these investigations that have dragged on now for what, 4 months?
He questioned how the system broke down to the point where agencies had gone rogue, and for those who asked for the PNP to allow the police investigation to go on, he said this.
The party, the People's National Party, rejects that. It is perfectly possible to deal with issues of nepotism, of embezzlement and fraud, to show what you have discovered and what steps you propose to take, quite independent of any criminal investigation.
Dashan Hendricks, TVJ News.
The public will know by the end of September the new rates to be paid for water supplied by the National Water Commission, NWC. The Office of Utilities Regulation says the new rates should have been announced this month. However, it said that timeline has been pushed back due to the NWC submitting a proposal to be allowed funds to address infrastructural deficiencies in its tariff review. And we now take a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back, continuing the news. At least one financial entity has responded to cries for more funding for small and medium-sized enterprises. CEO of Jamaica Money Market Brokers, Keith Duncan, says while the banks are moving to implement new products for SMEs, it's easier said than done. Mr. Duncan was speaking at the PSOJ JMMB Annual Economic Forum 2019 this morning. TVJ's Andrew Laidley reports.
Small and medium-sized enterprises contribute about 50 to 60% of Jamaica's output each year. But SMEs receive less than 10% of private sector loans. JMMB CEO Keith Duncan sought to explain.
SME lending is expensive for banks. It's not efficient. You know, it's resource intensive, high compliance costs, insufficient and inconsistency of data to analyze. The banks are using the more traditional credit adjudication models, not suited for SMEs.
And that's not the only challenge. Mr. Duncan says financial entities are also pressured by multilateral agencies to tighten restrictions around SME lending.
We also work with the multilaterals, you know, because they sometimes make it really tough for us because the kind of requirements they give us then to be able to on-lend to the sector is tough, and therefore this is sometimes why the requirements look onerous.
Mr. Duncan also called on small businesses to know which category they belong to, advising that some startups do not qualify for SME funding.
If I am a small business person and I have a business idea and I'm doing a business plan, you do not belong in a bank. You do not belong in a bank. You're looking for venture capital, private equity, or angel financing. If you have a startup idea, you access those services, so you don't go and clog up the line in the bank. You know where you are to go.
Andrew Laidley, TVJ News.
PNP presidential aspirant Peter Bunting says if he ascends to the office of Prime Minister, he will be tackling the issues facing contract workers. Mr. Bunting was speaking at his Rise United campaign launch on Sunday.
Too many businesses are using contract work as a device to avoid the labor laws and keep our workers in perpetual anxiety.
He describes the employment conditions for past years as a disgrace. Mr. Bunting contends that there needs to be an overhaul of the system where there is equity, where there is equality for all workers.
For example, unemployment insurance may be more appropriate today than the Redundancy Act. But whatever the mechanism, we must restore workers' rights. And that includes rights to their pension.
Close to $200 million is being spent on elevators in the Southeast Regional Health Authority, SERA. We have more in this report.
Last year, calls have been made for the government to address the dysfunctional elevators in the country's healthcare facilities. The government has heard and is answering that call. Through a partnership with the National Health Fund and Health Ministry, 14 elevators will be installed and recommissioned in the Southeast Regional Health Authority, SERA, which covers the parishes of St. Catherine, Kingston, St. Andrew, and St. Thomas. 2 elevators were recently recommissioned, one at the Victoria Jubilee Hospital and another at the Princess Margaret Hospital in St. Thomas. The elevator at the Victoria Jubilee Hospital was recommissioned at a cost of $17 million. Other hospitals to receive new elevators include National Chest, Kingston Public, Spanish Town, and Bustamante Hospital for Children. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
The government needs to make it easier for women to be public servants. So says opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips. He believes the mindset of some parliamentarians has created a misogynistic culture in government, and it's time for a change. We have more in this report.
Peter Phillips, leader of the People's National Party, has made serious efforts to speak out in favor of women's rights and structures that hinder them from performing their public duties. He was speaking at a PNP Women's Conference in Montego Bay this weekend. This push by Dr. Phillips comes days after the sexual harassment bill that will greatly affect the work environment of many women in Jamaica was tabled in Parliament.
For one thing, the culture is still in many respects disrespectful of women and their role in society and in public life. Is to put our energies in the party, man and woman, to change in that culture which treats a woman as if she has less individual rights to her person than a man.
Since his presidential seat has been threatened, Lisa Hanna, Imani Duncan Price, Valerie Nita Robertson, and other women have thrown their support behind Dr. Phillips. In his speech, he said that changes need to be made to support women in government and enable them to perform at their best in their respective capacities.
Parliament meet at 2 o'clock, which is when plenty women go for them children at school. If we want more women in the Parliament, we have to agitate for Parliament to have a proper daycare center so women can take care of children while doing the people's business at the same time. And we have to encourage more men to do the work in the household.
Andrew Laidley, TVJ News.
Several councillors in Portmore St. Catherine are calling for the National Solid Waste Management Authority, NSWMA, to rethink its nightly garbage collection policy in the parish. The councillors say the new measure has been posing a challenge for residents. The details in this report.
Public Health Manager at the National Solid Waste Management Authority, Nigel Gooden, reported that the agency has been improving its garbage collection in St. Catherine. Mr. Gooden says that improvement is due to nightly collection. However, several councillors raised concern about its effectiveness, particularly in Greater Portmore.
Portmore people, right, don't have anywhere to store garbage overnight because of the dogs.
Yes.
And when they put it out there during the night, in the morning, it's a mess.
Yeah.
Arses in the center. So the thing is that you already build this culture within the people of Portmore that on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, various communities will be collected. So they normally put out the garbage at that time.
When people come home at night, you know we have the one parking lot. They park on boats. People park on both sides of the parking lot. The truck can't come in. If the truck even come in, it can't access the walkways because a lot of the persons park in front of the walkways because that's where they normally park. And then you come at 11 o'clock with a truck that stink like night plus day and the horn going like crazy.
To make things worse, the councillors say the residents are not given prior notice of the nightly schedules.
At first we started off by not announcing, and when it was brought to our attention, we got our town crier, we sent out our town crier.
Where?
In the various communities that we're going to collect in the night.
So I don't understand. The people go to work in the day, and you send the crier when they're going to work, and then they send the truck at night. How do you know? Don't come and just say, boy, we are the collection at night. It's not making no sense. It's a waste of little money. And the tax money we pay for taxes are dropped down in our hole. It's not making any sense. So it don't make sense. You have one little drop of money where you can't, there's nothing, you can't impact the community when you have trucks. And when you don't have none, you spend some more money, waste some more money doing foolishness. You don't have to stand and think about this thing.
Nick Dawkins, TVJ News.
We're going on to news in sports. There is still uncertainty surrounding the start of the National Women's Football League despite their historic qualification for the recent FIFA Women's World Cup in France. Karen Madden reports.
After limping along following Sherwin Williams' pullout 3 seasons ago, the Jamaica Football Federation National Women's League seems set to suffer the same fate this season. The country's national women's program received a huge shot in the arm when the senior women's team, the Reggae Girls, qualified for FIFA's Showpiece tournament. But despite an influx of sponsorship support, including Sherwin Williams, the JFF has admitted that it is still struggling to find a league sponsor for the 2019 season.
The truth of the matter is that we are waiting for a title sponsor. We have not yet acquired one. And this is something that we are working assiduously to fill, and hopefully in the very near future we'll be able to say that we do have a title sponsor.
National head coach Hugh Menzies has said that the country needs a league which lasts at least 6 months to get local-based players at the level to warrant national selection. But JFF General Secretary Dalton Wint says while sponsors are nipping, that may not happen anytime soon.
We have asked our present sponsor to come forward and to support the girls in the Premier League, but they weren't able to do so at this time. But we, as I have said, we are working on other interests. Hopefully we'll be able to announce that we have a title sponsor for this league.
Meanwhile, the uncertainty of a start date is impacting preparations. Several teams, including defending champions Waterhouse, have not kicked off their preseason as yet.
For you to prepare, you have to know what are you preparing for. So in terms of even your periodization, your planning, etc., you have to know what you want to do when and how and all of these things. So it don't make sense just start to do something when it's uncertain as it relates to when you're going to start.
One team that has started training is last season's beaten finalist.
We know it's costing to keep the girls in training, but hey, this is football and they want to play football, so you know we have to just come out and do what we have to do. I must say it's pretty disappointment. I mean, hey, Jamaica went to the World Cup for the very first time, and we must pay emphasis to our females and give them more respect, you know, because, you know, they are the future, and we must look to them to go back to the next World Cup.
The league was held last season with a $1 million sponsorship support and funds from FIFA. Though several players on the historic Reggae Girls team came out of Jamaica's high school and the senior league programs, all the players who represented Jamaica in France either attend school in the U.S. or are applying their trade professionally in North America or Europe. Karen Madden, TVJ Sports.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Herman Green. Remember, primetime news is at 7. On behalf of the news, sports, and production teams, good afternoon.